All right, today we're going to take the skills we've learned in doing gradients and making cool planets that have sort of some rotundity to them. As we look at this one here, we can see that the gradient that we used allowed us to, there we go, allowed us to make um, some curves to it to trace the shape of the planet. And there's some other effects we're going to try out today, like this one here, that makes it look a little more fiery. Strangely enough, that's called wood grain. And then there's this one here that just makes it look a little bit rougher. There's a few things you can try out. Additionally, new tools we're going to try today to make this mountain range is the pen tool. Now, the pen tool is something we haven't really done much of yet, but real quick, the way the pen tool works, let me just kind of review this real quick in a fresh document, let me just set a fill shape or fill color. There we go. So what it's going to do is as I click on this, it wants to make just one click, it wants to make straight lines, and it wants to close it. So as you can see, when I get to the last one, it says, hey, do you want me to close, boss? I'm like, yeah, there's a little circle next to pen tool. If there's not next to the last, the starting, that was the starting point there. Uh, if it is next to it, you'll see a little circle. If it's not next to it, no circle. Let's close that. Now, if I want curvy shapes, then I can click and drag, and I get handles. And as you may know by now, handles control the shape of the curve. So if I want to make this shape curvy, I got this going on. And you can also combine curves and straights just by clicking on some and clicking and dragging others. So if I start by clicking and go like this and like this and like this, and then I'm going to go back and close this one, I've got flat on the bottom. Now I could take those 2 points, by the way, just to inform you of this. If I use the align panel and I say align to selection and I say vertical line center, it's going to set those 2 points even with each other, just like you would with objects. So let's close that up, I guess. Um, let's see. Other stuff that we're going to try out today, it has to do with different ways of using gradients. Let's hop right into it, shall we? So one of the first things I'm going to do is build a sky again, and I'm going to use a rectangle for this. My rectangle should be 11 by 8.5. That's the size of my screen, and it's a terrible color to use. But let's just align to artboard and align this way. I'm going to kill the stroke on it. And it was the fill I just killed. That was bad. But let's set that to a gradient. And let's set it to a radial gradient. This is stuff we did last class. And with my color panel open, I'm going to set this stop here in HSB land to a blue shade. So I'm trying to get a nice dark sky. So a little less saturated. If it's too saturated, it's going to wind up dominating the scene. So I want to try to see what that looks like as that shade. I'm kind of happy with it, ish. Yeah, I don't know. Let's go back to this point here. I'm going to desaturate just a bit more. Maybe bring it up to brightness. Let's adjust the hue a little bit. So I can slide all these things around in one place until I get what I want. Now, I like that color, and I don't want to have to adjust this white to match because it's not going to go all the way white. So what I'm going to do is drag the slider over, add a new one, and get rid of the old one. So this one here is my middle of my radial. So I'm going to open this up, and if I go to, gosh, I closed the color panel, didn't I? Anyways, let's reduce the saturation, which will make it lighter and brighter. And you can try a little bit of both, more brightness, less saturation, etc., etc. Now, I do want to adjust the rotation of this, and you can do this with the transparency of the gradient tool here also. So I can rotate this. Lots of ways to do the job on this. I'm going to shrink it down maybe. I don't know. Trying stuff out. Squish it down. Gosh, I really want a different color here still. So you can adjust the thing like forever. And that's one of the benefits of using Illustrator is that all these things that you create are forever editable. Alright, so as I change this up, let's go with that. Sort of happy. I feel like this is still too bright. And HSB, if I kept my color panel open, I could just use that. So let's just do that. Let's close this. Get the color panel. Color. F6 is apparently the keyboard shortcut. Didn't know that. And I'm going to There we go. Not too drastic. There we go. That's happy. Now we also talked last class about making stars, and I'm going to rip through this pretty quick. I'm going to use the star tool. I'm going to make a star that is 11 points, which is kind of awkward and weird. I'm going to go with 0.3 by 0.4. You could even go smaller. Let's go 0.1 by 0.2. And those are the radii on the 2 points. So the inner point and the outer point. So it looks probably right, but I want it to be white. So I'm going to set it to white here. And it's still kind of big. So if I use the transform panel, I can set the size to smaller still. So if I go with the width and the height, let's lock those. Let me lock those together. So if I got 0.15, and I need it to be small so that when it scatters, it's going to have small size scattering. So I need to open up the brush panel. This part I'm going kind of fast because we did this last class. Whoops. I really wanted to grab that and drag it to the new layer, the new brush panel. There we go, new brush. Scatter brush. Got to rip through this kind of quick. You can slow it down as you see fit. Let's see, I'm going to change this all to random. It's debatable whether rotation needs to be random or not, but why not? So if I just alter that, and it's just going to make they're all random rotations so they're not all exactly the same. I'm going to scatter them left and right of the path. I'm going to change the spacing, and I think that's based on the size of the object. I don't know. Size, let's change the sizes from pretty small to not quite as small. Click OK. Zoom out. Let's take that and move it over. So I'm using Shift and the left arrow to move it quicker. And now using the brush, with that brush selected, I can go like this. And now I've got a starry sky. Very nice. I'm happy. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lock that layer. And we're going to build, let's name layers. Let's have this one be called sky. So I double click to name layers. This one be called land. And this is going to be a planetary surface. And I'm thinking like Mars or whatever. You know, so if I use a rectangle tool and make this is my land surface on Mars or something. So I'm going to make it kind of Mars colored, which is kind of reddish orange. Not all the way saturated because that's just too dominant, but something sort of, you know, red dirt colored. Think The Martian with Matt Damon. If you haven't seen it, what a good movie that was. Didn't change the color because I didn't have it selected. So I got to do that again, unfortunately. Let's do this. There we go. That's kind of Mars colored. Now what I want to do is I want to have something called atmospheric perspective that will allow me to apply sort of grading to this without as much work as it's been before. So I have to change up the colors. I'm going to choose object, no, edit. Can I have the thing selected? Edit, copy, and edit, paste in front. That means it's going to be in exactly the same spot, but I have two of them. So the top one here, I'm going to change to being a gradient. That's not the gradient I wanted. So I'm going to set my gradient to the black and white. I'm going to rotate this to -90, I think. Or is it the other way? I can't remember which way I want this. Yeah, I want it to get lighter as it gets farther away. Atmospheric perspective. So if I change the transparency blend mode to multiply, it makes the white areas transparent and the black areas opaque. Now I don't actually want the near end to be totally black, so I go back to my gradient panel and I adjust the sliders. Let's pick a slider here for the gray, get rid of the black one, and move that over. And you can slide this back and forth to get more of the look you're after. And, you know, there's a couple ways of working that out. So try stuff out, adjust it, work with it. You'll get this. And this one's fine for linear. Now I'm going to use the pen tool, as we discussed earlier, to make my mountains. And I'm kind of a lazy butt sometimes. So I'm dragging to make the mountain curvy. Drag this one, and I don't need a lot of points. Just 1 point per mountain, and you can get this as realistic as you want. More points, less points. And then when I go to the end, I can close it off like this. Not the color I want though, is it? I definitely want to have a color, not a gradient there. I'm eventually going to add a gradient, of course, but let's change it so that we have sort of that red color. And I can possibly do that by clicking here. Nope, that did the gradient. So if I hide that gradient and click the eyedropper tool right there, it gets the same color. So that's kind of what I want. Let's turn that gradient back on though. And we're going to apply a similar gradient to the shape, same way we did. Click, and actually before we do, let's go ahead and Object, Transform, and use Reflect, because we're going to make the same mountains twice, and just scale it down. So these are the front mountains, and the back ones will be taller maybe. So as we reflect this, I chose Object, Transform, Select, I think it was. Let's go back. I want to make sure. You can't really see it on the screen. Object, Transform, Reflect. So what Reflect is going to do for me is reflect in the vertical axis. So it's going to flip long ways, left to right. There we go. Alright, so now that I have an extra set of mountains, I want these to be different, because otherwise it looks like I just copied and pasted them. And I did, but I don't want to get caught with that. So here's this other set of mountains. And let's see, these ones are in front of the other ones I made. So these are the shorter ones or the taller ones. These are the shorter ones. So they're in front, which is what I want. So next I'm going to duplicate that and copy and paste, I guess. So edit, copy, and edit, paste in front. And this one is going to get the gradient treatment again. Again, this is going to go -90. And I'm going to change the transparency to multiply. And I can again go back to gradient and adjust this a bit. So we're trying to get it looking far away, and do the same thing back here. It's going to be edit, copy, edit, paste in front, and let's add the gradient to that one. And again, it's important to note that we have two layers of the same thing. There's the bell, and this one is also -90, using the same gradient that I already made. And let's again set that to multiply, and we might want to take the front one here and adjust its gradient just a little bit. So there's different levels of opacity on my mountain gradient, so the far away ones look farther away, right? So I can take this one and let's see, you could try other blend modes also. So if you try screen's horrible, that's never going to work. Darken might work sometimes. So just try different blend modes and see what you get. And now the thing I still have to get out of this is some planets. Now in the interest of time, because you've done this before, I'm going to go get a planet from here. Let's take this one, and I'm just going to copy it in here. Paste. And oops, that was the wrong part of the planet. That one had a gradient applied to it. So what I have these set up for is, let's just look at it here. I have planet, and what I did is I took this and I did object, path, offset path, and I did a preview. And you sort of have to mess around with this. I went with not that much of a offset. So if I make this bigger, if I go 0.1, there's more. If I go 0.05, there's less. And what I want to do with that is actually make that into a gradient also. So if I set this to, on gradient, the black and white one, and set that to radial, it's behind, and it's got this backwards. I want this so that the white is on the outside. And we're going to have two whites out there. So this one here, this one we're going to set the opacity to 0. So there's a fade, and it's sort of an atmosphere happening there. And you can slide this over if you want to, and adjust that so it leans more in one direction than the other. So it kind of gives you a faded sense of the atmosphere around the planet, and that's something that you can try out. The last thing I'm going to throw at you, you can't really see it in here too well, but there's actually a gradient right here that is on a separate layer. I've got layers on layers on layers, and this one, turn it off, turn it on, is a rectangular gradient that is the atmosphere of the planet that we're sitting on. So let's go back to here, and I'm just going to show you how I did that. Let's make a separate layer for that. And don't forget to have planets in your sky. Very important. It's a space game. So I'm going to take this, make a rectangle right here, and this is under my mountains here. And it looks like I just used the gradient for radial, but I'm going to use linear. And again, I'm going to set this to -90, I guess, because I want that to fade upwards. I want to make sure I'm using radial. There we go. It should fade upwards. So you can adjust your sort of planetary atmosphere like that. So each of these, this one's only 30%, this one is like 0%. So there's a nice fade there that we see when we build it in. Going back to this one, you can see sort of how it works. That's the work for today. Have some fun with it and rock on.